I've always known the Philippines was beautiful. My parents used to tell me stories about their childhoods, painting vibrant images of lush green landscapes, crystalline beaches, and the heart-thumping excitement of fiesta season. Fiesta season, a time of year when towns burst into life with parades, music, and endless feasts, celebrating various patron saints. This year, I finally decided to take a break from my hectic life in San Francisco and experience it for myself. Along with my best friend, Marissa, we embarked on what we hoped would be the adventure of a lifetime. We arrived in a small town known for its elaborate fiesta celebrations. The streets were festooned with colorful banners, and the air was thick with the smell of roasting lechon. The locals welcomed us with open arms, their smiles as warm as the tropical sun. Among them, we met a charming man named Lito. Tall and handsome with a smile that could light up the darkest of rooms, he seemed to take a special interest in us. He offered to show us around, explaining the significance of each event and introducing us to local delicacies. As the days went by, Lito became a familiar presence. He seemed knowledgeable about everything, from the history of the town to the best places to get halo-halo. Marissa and I felt lucky to have made such a great friend. It wasn't long before he invited us to visit his barrio, a term referring to a small village or neighborhood within the town, where the festivities were supposedly even more spectacular. Excitement bubbling inside us, we accepted his invitation without a second thought. The journey to his barrio was a scenic one, with fields of rice paddies and distant mountains providing a picturesque backdrop. Upon our arrival, we were greeted with a grand fiesta in full swing. The townspeople were welcoming, and the food was abundant. However, something felt slightly off. The smiles seemed a bit too wide, the eyes following us a bit too closely. That night, the hospitality took a darker turn. We were given a cozy room in one of the houses, but sleep eluded us. Marissa was restless, and a sense of unease settled in my stomach. We whispered our worries to each other, but exhaustion eventually took over. I woke up to the sound of muffled voices and shuffling feet. Peering through a small window, I saw townspeople gathering outside, their faces obscured by shadows. My heart raced as I realized they were discussing us. Words like aswang and main course floated through the air. Panic set in as I recalled tales my grandparents used to tell. An aswang is a mythical creature in Filipino folklore, a shape-shifting monster that preys on humans, often appearing as a regular person during the day and transforming into a beast at night. I shook Marissa awake, my voice trembling. "We need to leave, now." We tried to sneak out quietly, but the creaky floorboards betrayed us. The door burst open, and Lito stood there, his charming smile replaced with a predatory grin. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked, his voice dripping with malice. Panic set in as Marissa and I realized we were the intended main course. Adrenaline courses through my veins, grabbed the lamp beside the bed and hit Lito in the head. I grabbed Marissa by the arm and jumped through the window. Once outside, we bolted for the dense forest surrounding the barrio, hoping the darkness would provide cover. The chase was on. Aswangs, in their true forms, are terrifying. Their eyes glowed in the dark, and their limbs elongated grotesquely. We could hear their inhuman screeches and the rustle of leaves as they pursued us. Marissa and I ran as fast as we could, adrenaline pushing us beyond our limits. We stumbled through the forest, branches scratching our skin and unseen roots tripping us up. The sounds of the aswangs grew closer, and my heart pounded in my ears. Just as despair began to overwhelm us, we saw headlights cutting through the darkness. A group of local farmers, alerted by our cries, had come to investigate. They knew the legends and, armed with torches and bolos, they fought off the aswangs, driving them back into the depths of the forest. Safe but shaken, Marissa and I were escorted back to town. The farmers explained that their ancestors had dealt with aswangs for generations. The creatures had adapted to blend in with humans, but their hunger always gave them away eventually. We reported what happened to the local authorities, but they seemed skeptical. Lito and the others were nowhere to be found. Our vacation was cut short, and we left the Philippines with heavy hearts and haunted minds. The beauty of the fiesta season was forever tainted by the nightmare we endured. Back in San Francisco, Marissa and I tried to resume our normal lives, but the memories of that fateful night is etched in our minds forever. We had been planning this hiking trip for months. Mark, the seasoned hiker, Julia, the wildlife enthusiast, Lucas, the jokester, Sarah, the ever-curious nature photographer, and me, Alex, the guy who just wanted a break from the city grind. The mountains were calling, and we were eager to answer. The first few days were pure bliss. We trekked through dense forests, crossed bubbling streams, and camped under the star-studded sky. The fresh air was a welcome change from the polluted city, and the camaraderie among us made the experience even more enjoyable. We laughed, shared stories, and marveled at the beauty surrounding us. On the third night, Mark suggested we go hunting. He had brought a rifle, convinced we could catch a deer and have a proper feast. The rest of us were hesitant, but eventually agreed, caught up in the excitement of the adventure. As dusk fell, we set out, our flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. It wasn't long before we spotted a deer. Mark took aim and fired. The deer bolted, and we followed its trail, hoping to find it nearby. But after an hour of searching, we came up empty-handed. Disappointed, we headed back to our campsite, deciding to resume our hunt in the morning. That night, as we sat around the campfire, strange calls echoed through the forest. They were unlike anything we had ever heard before, deep, resonant, and chilling. Julia tried to assure us it was just a distant animal, but an uneasy feeling settled over the group. We decided to call it a night and retreated to our tents. I woke up to the sound of screams, piercing and filled with terror. I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and rushed outside. The sight that met my eyes was a nightmare. Our campsite was in chaos. Mark and Julia were lying motionless, their bodies torn apart. Sarah was gone, her tent shredded. Lucas was nowhere to be seen. Heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and frantically scanned the area. That's when I saw it, a massive figure, towering over the carnage, its eyes glowing in the darkness. It was Bigfoot, the legendary creature we had dismissed as a myth. In its arms, it held Sarah, limp and lifeless. Before I could react, Bigfoot turned its gaze to me. With a roar that shook the trees, it lunged. I tried to run, but its immense hand grabbed me, lifting me off the ground as if I weighed nothing. I struggled, kicking and punching, but its grip was unyielding. As I dangled helplessly, I noticed something in the distance, the body of the deer Mark had shot. Realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. The deer wasn't just any deer, it was Bigfoot's offspring. Bigfoot carried me through the forest with ease, its stride long and purposeful. It brought me to a cave, deep in the mountains. Inside, the walls were adorned with crude drawings, depicting creatures like itself and the natural world around them. The cave was a sanctuary, a place of mourning. It threw me onto the cold, hard ground and began to wail, a sound filled with grief and anger. In that moment, I understood its pain. We had taken its child, and now it was taking revenge. I had to escape. While Bigfoot was distracted, I inched toward the cave entrance. Each movement felt like an eternity, but finally, I made it outside. I ran, adrenaline coursing through my veins, not daring to look back. The forest was a blur as I sprinted towards our campsite. When I arrived, the sight of my friend's remains nearly broke me, but I had no time to grieve. I grabbed what supplies I could, water, a map, a knife, and fled into the night. For hours, I stumbled through the forest, guided only by the pale light of the moon. I could hear Bigfoot's roars in the distance, but I kept moving, driven by sheer survival instinct. Dawn was breaking when I finally emerged from the woods, collapsing onto a dirt road where a passing truck driver found me. I was rescued, but the experience left scars that would never heal. My friends were gone, victims of a tragic misunderstanding between man and nature. Bigfoot, once a creature of legend, was now a very real part of my nightmares. In the end, I learned that nature is not to be trifled with. We had entered its domain and paid a dear price. My name is Jack Thompson, and I've always been a seeker of thrills. Born and raised in the bustling heart of New York City, I grew up surrounded by concrete and chaos. The adrenaline rush of city life kept me going, but it also left me craving something more primal, something raw and untamed. So, when I landed a job as a freelance travel writer, I took it as an opportunity to explore the wildest, most remote places on Earth. I've traveled to the Amazon, trekked through the Sahara, and scaled the Rocky Mountains. My stories brought me fame, but it was the thrill of the unknown that kept me going. My latest assignment took me to the dense, uncharted forests of the Pacific Northwest. Rumors of strange sightings and unexplained disappearances had intrigued me for years, and now I had the chance to uncover the truth. I arrived in a small logging town that bordered the forest. The locals were friendly but tight-lipped about the woods. They exchanged wary glances when I asked about the rumors. One old man, with weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much, pulled me aside. "Be careful in those woods," he warned, his voice low and grave. "There's something out there, something that doesn't take kindly to visitors." Undeterred, I set off the next morning, equipped with my backpack, camera, and a sense of excitement. The forest was beautiful, with towering pines and a thick canopy that filtered the sunlight into dappled patches on the forest floor. Birds chirped, and the air was crisp and fresh, a far cry from the polluted air of New York. As I ventured deeper, the forest grew darker and more oppressive. The sounds of wildlife faded, replaced by an eerie silence. I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Curiosity piqued, I decided to investigate. The cabin was in disrepair, with broken windows and a door hanging off its hinges. Inside, the air was musty, and the floor was littered with leaves and debris. I found a journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The entries detailed strange occurrences, sightings of a creature that defied description, a cryptid the locals called the Shadow Stalker. The last entry was frantic, warning anyone who read it to leave the forest immediately. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off. I'd faced danger before, and this was no different. As dusk approached, I set up camp a safe distance from the cabin, determined to capture any evidence of the cryptid. That night, as I sat by the campfire, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. Grabbing my flashlight, I scanned the trees. At first, I saw nothing, but then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, with matted fur and eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. My breath caught in my throat as the creature stepped into the firelight. Its face was twisted, almost human but grotesquely deformed, with long, sharp claws protruding from its hands. The Shadow Stalker. Panic surged through me, and I bolted, the creature letting out a guttural roar as it gave chase. I ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping my face and roots threatening to trip me. The sound of the creature's pursuit was deafening, its heavy footsteps growing closer. I stumbled into a ravine, sliding down the muddy slope and into a shallow creek. The water was freezing, but I forced myself to keep moving. I could hear the creature's growls echoing through the trees. Desperation fueled my flight, and I scrambled up the opposite bank, pushing through the underbrush. I burst into a small clearing, my chest heaving and muscles burning. The moonlight cast an eerie glow, illuminating the creature as it emerged from the trees. It slowed, seeming to relish the hunt. I was cornered, with nowhere to run. The shadow stalker advanced, and I felt a surge of determination. I grabbed a fallen branch, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back!" I shouted, though my voice trembled. The creature hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. For a moment, it seemed almost curious, as if assessing my worth as prey. Then, with a snarl, it lunged. I swung the branch with all my might, striking the creature across the face. It recoiled, more surprised than hurt. I took the opportunity to dart past it, heading for a rocky outcrop I'd noticed earlier. Climbing the rocks, I found a narrow crevice and squeezed inside, my body barely fitting. The creature clawed at the entrance, but it was too large to follow. I could see its eyes glaring at me, filled with rage and frustration. I spent the night in that crevice, too afraid to move. The creature eventually retreated, but I knew it was still out there, waiting. At dawn, I cautiously emerged and made my way back to the logging town, my body aching and mind reeling from the encounter. The locals didn't seem surprised when I told them what happened. The old man nodded solemnly, as if he had been expecting it. "The forest doesn't like outsiders," he said. "You're lucky to be alive." I left the Pacific Northwest with a story unlike any other, a tale of a cryptid that defied belief. The thrill of the hunt had nearly cost me my life, but it had also given me a new respect for the mysteries of the wild. Some things, I realized, are better left undiscovered. My name is Emma Sinclair, and I grew up with stories of the Loch Ness Monster. My father, a marine biologist with an insatiable curiosity, spent his life chasing legends and unraveling the mysteries of the deep. His greatest obsession was Nessie, the elusive creature rumored to dwell in the dark waters of Loch Ness. My earliest memories are of him poring over maps, reviewing sonar readings, and sharing his findings with an infectious enthusiasm. Every summer, we would travel to the Scottish Highlands, where he would conduct his research. To me, Loch Ness was a magical place, shrouded in mist and mystery. I believed in Nessie because my father believed, and that was enough for me. Then, when I was 15, tragedy struck. It was a calm, clear morning when my father set out on the loch, determined to follow a new lead. I watched from the shore as his boat drifted further and further away. Hours passed, and the sun dipped below the horizon, but he didn't return. A search was conducted, but all they found was his empty boat, floating aimlessly. My father was gone, claimed by the waters he loved so much. The loss shattered me. For years, I couldn't bear to look at the loch or hear its name without feeling a deep ache in my heart. But as time passed, grief turned into a burning desire to continue his work. It was as if a part of him lived on in me, urging me to find the answers he sought. I dedicated myself to studying marine biology, following in his footsteps with a singular focus, finding the Loch Ness Monster. Years later, I returned to Loch Ness, armed with my father's research and my own equipment. The locals remembered my father and regarded me with a mixture of pity and respect. I set up a small lab near the shore, determined to honor his memory by finishing what he started. Days turned into weeks, and then months. I spent countless hours on the water, scanning the depths with sonar, recording everything. There were moments of doubt and despair, but also moments of hope. Every ripple, every shadow beneath the surface, filled me with anticipation. One fateful night, as a full moon cast an ethereal glow over the loch, I decided to take one last trip before the season ended. The air was crisp, and the water was unnervingly still. I drifted in the middle of the loch, listening to the gentle lapping of waves against my boat. I was alone, but I felt a presence, a connection to my father. I lowered the sonar and watched the screen intently. At first, it was the usual static and blips of fish. Then, something large appeared on the monitor, moving slowly beneath the boat. My heart raced. I grabbed my camera, ready to capture whatever emerged. Suddenly, the boat rocked gently. I peered over the edge, and there it was, Nessie. The creature's head rose from the water, long and serpentine, with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom and curiosity. It was more magnificent than I had ever imagined. I froze, torn between fear and awe. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. Then, I did something I never expected. I spoke. "Hello, Nessie," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm Emma. My father, Richard Sinclair, believed in you. I believe in you." To my astonishment, Nessie didn't retreat. Instead, it moved closer, its eyes reflecting the moonlight. It was as if the creature understood, as if it recognized my voice, my father's voice. I reached out tentatively, my hand trembling. Nessie's head nudged my palm, a gentle, almost affectionate gesture. Tears streamed down my face as I realized I had found what my father had spent his life searching for. In that moment, I felt his presence more strongly than ever. It was as if he were there with me, sharing in the wonder and joy of the discovery. Nessie lingered for a while, its presence both comforting and surreal. We shared a quiet communion, a bond forged through years of belief and longing. As dawn approached, the creature slowly submerged, disappearing into the depths of the loch. I returned to shore, my mind and heart overflowing. I had found Nessie, but more importantly, I had found closure. My father's dream had become my own, and in achieving it, I felt a profound connection to him and to the mysteries of the world. In the following months, I documented my encounter, sharing it with the scientific community and the world. There were skeptics, of course, but there were also believers. My father's legacy lived on, and so did the legend of Nessie. I still visit Loch Ness, not to chase shadows, but to honor the past and celebrate the unknown. The loch is a place of magic and memory, where my father's spirit swims alongside Nessie, forever a part of the deep, dark waters. The rain tapped lightly against the window as I sat in my grandfather's cozy living room. The dim glow of the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. It was a tradition for us to gather here every Saturday night, where Grandpa would share stories from his youth. Tonight, however, felt different. There was an air of anticipation as he settled into his old armchair, his eyes twinkling with a mix of nostalgia and mischief. "Tommy," he began, his voice gravelly yet comforting. "Have I ever told you about the time your grandmother and I encountered the Mothman?" I shook my head, intrigued. Grandpa's stories were always fascinating, but this one seemed particularly special. Well, it was the summer of 1966. I was 18, and your grandmother, Mary, was just my girlfriend then. We decided to take a road trip, exploring the back roads of West Virginia. It was a simpler time, and we were young, wild, and in love. He leaned back, a wistful smile playing on his lips. We had been driving all day in my old Ford Mustang, and as night fell, we found ourselves on a lonely stretch of highway near Point Pleasant. The sky was dark, and a storm was brewing, but we didn't mind. We were together, and that was all that mattered. We were listening to the radio, singing along to the tunes, when suddenly, the car sputtered and died. I tried the ignition, but it wouldn't start. We were miles from the nearest town, and the rain was starting to pour. I remember Mary was a bit anxious, but I tried to keep her calm. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll figure it out." Grandpa's expression grew serious as he continued. I got out to check under the hood, and that's when I felt it. A presence, watching us from the darkness. I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination, but then Mary let out a gasp. "John," she whispered, "do you see that?" I looked up and saw something I'll never forget. Two large, red eyes, glowing in the distance, staring right at us. They were unlike anything I had ever seen, piercing through the night. My heart raced, and I knew we weren't alone. The eyes moved closer, and as they did, the figure behind them became clearer. It was tall, much taller than any man, with large wings folded behind it. The Mothman. It made no sound, but its presence was terrifying. Mary and I were frozen, unable to look away. Then, out of sheer instinct, I remembered the gun I kept in the glove compartment for protection. I had never had to use it before, but something told me this was different. I slowly reached into the car, my hand shaking, and pulled out the revolver. The Mothman began to move toward us, its wings unfolding with a menacing grace. I took a deep breath, aimed, and fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed through the night, and for a moment, the creature hesitated. Its eyes never left us, but it stopped its advance. With Mary clutching my arm, I fired another shot, this time into the ground near its feet. The Mothman let out an unearthly screech, a sound that still haunts my dreams, and with a powerful flap of its wings, it took off into the sky, disappearing into the storm. We were left in stunned silence, the rain pouring down around us. I tried the car one last time, and miraculously, the engine roared to life. We didn't waste any time getting out of there, driving as fast as we could back to civilization. Grandpa paused, his eyes meeting mine. That night changed everything. Mary and I never spoke of it again, not wanting to relive the terror. But it brought us closer, made us realize how precious our time together was. We got married the next year, and well, the rest is history. I sat there, absorbing the story, a mix of awe and disbelief swirling in my mind. "Grandpa, do you really think it was the Mothman?" He smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "Tommy, there are things in this world we can't explain. Whether it was the Mothman or something else, I know what I saw. And sometimes, it's those unexplainable moments that make life all the more extraordinary." As the rain continued to fall outside, I felt a new connection to my grandparents, a deeper understanding of their love, and the mysteries they faced together. Grandpa's story wasn't just about an encounter with a cryptid, it was a testament to their courage, their bond, and the enduring power of love in the face of the unknown.